That's right. You're looking at the next Mr. fucking Olympia. Soak it in. Get ready to meet your fucking maker. Alright, now that we got that out of the way. Hi, it's me again. Stop. Today we're going to talk about how to create and set up your own training split. Now this is something... Stop! I have the talking stick. Hey! We're talking about training splits. This is something I get asked about a lot, and I've made an in-depth video on this before on TikTok, but we can't go super in-depth on TikTok, so we're going to get more in-depth on here in this YouTube video. So let's just get right into it. Got no time to waste. But first, I do want to make it clear that a lot of people seem to think that there is such thing as the best split, the best training split. There's always this huge controversy between bro split and push-pull legs, which one is better, and there is no such thing as the best split. It doesn't exist. It doesn't matter that one has more frequency. Frequency doesn't matter when total volume is equated for, and we'll get into all that here in a bit. But just keep that in mind. There is no such thing as the best split. It depends on you, the individual, your goals, your preferences, how you like to train. So with that being said, what are some things you need to take into consideration when you begin, when you start creating your training split? What are some things you need to take into consideration? And that would be, for one, how many days a week can you even train to begin with? That matters, obviously, right? Not everybody can train 5 days a week. Some people need to train less. Some people can train more, although I would recommend most people don't go more than 5 days a week. Another thing would be, do you have flexibility within your daily life, your schedule? So that could completely alter the type of split you could run too. So for example, if you are somebody who wants to have the weekends off because you work a 9 to 5 or whatever, then you need to revolve your split around that. You're not going to want to do something like 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off, because you're constantly going to have different days of the week on and off. It's going to change with the weeks. It's not going to be consistent like on a consistent 7-day routine when you run a split like that. So you have to take that into consideration and think about what you want really in your life, because it obviously varies on every individual and their lifestyle and just their daily schedule. Not everybody lives this bodybuilding lifestyle where they revolve their entire life around it. Some people want to have the weekends off to spend time with their family and kids and just get their workouts done Monday through Friday. So that's going to obviously dictate the type of split that is best for you, right? That also will play into how much time can you spend at the gym. Like I said, not everybody, wants to spend 2 hours a day in the gym. Like somebody like myself, I'm fine with it. I'm a bodybuilder. I do this for a living. I have no problem spending 2 hours a day in the gym. I enjoy it, but some people really need to narrow that down and get that down to an hour, 45 minutes, shorter workouts, because they just don't have time with such a busy schedule. So that's obviously going to dictate the type of split they'll be running too, in a sense. Then we also need to figure out what our primary goal is here, right? Are you somebody who is more advanced and trying to bring up a particularly weak body part? Are you somebody who is trying to just build overall more mass and get bigger, which is going to be the vast majority of you? You are not going to have weak points and need to focus on bringing up specific body parts, doing more of a specialized split, unless you are more advanced. So that is not something I would worry about. For the majority of people, they just need to focus on just building more mass overall, building a foundation of that, and that takes years to do. Now let's talk about volume, and this is the thing that everybody fucking creams their pants over. How much volume do I need to do? Is this too much? Is this too little? So let's talk about that for a second here. And when we're talking about volume, remember that volume can be a measurement of anything, right? So we need to define what volume is, what we're referring to. And whenever we're talking about hypertrophy training, bodybuilding, the amount of volume that we're talking about is the amount of effective sets that we're doing to failure. So the amount of stimulating effective sets. So this doesn't include warm-up sets. This doesn't include feeder sets. And feeder sets are what bridge the gap between warm-up and working sets. If you don't know what those are, look it up. I'm not going to get into that right now. But we're only talking about effective working stimulating sets here. That's the volume. That's the total volume. So if you do 10 working sets for chest in a workout, that's your volume. And again, we're only talking about those hard, intense sets where you're going to absolute failure in this context, everything I'm going to talk about here. Because if you're staying further away from failure, which you could do, it's not necessarily wrong. I don't think it's the best way to go about training, in my opinion. But you could do that, stay further away from failure for whatever reason. But in order to get the same result as going to failure, you would have to do more volume to make up for that. So in that context, if you're doing a bunch of sets with 3 reps in reserve, for example, you would have to do more of those sets than compared to doing sets going to absolute failure, 0 RIR. So pushing the absolute envelope, you could do less of those, do less sets going to absolute failure. You would have to do more sets not going to failure to get the same result, if that makes sense. But for the purpose of this video, we're solely going to be talking in the context of going to absolute failure. Now with volume, the thing is that everybody wants this magic answer as to how much they should be doing, right? You know, this is the number. Anything more than this is pointless, and I read this study, this literature says this. Shut up, all right? It's not that simple. It's not that black and white, and anybody who talks in absolutes like that doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about, you know? It varies across individuals. There's a lot of nuance to it. We know the ranges, right? We know you should stay relatively within this range. Could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more. Doesn't necessarily make it bad. Just depends. It all depends, and really what is most important is your progression as the individual and experimenting with these ranges, starting lower, titrating up, seeing how you respond. There is such thing as doing too little volume, and there is such thing as doing too much volume. There is usually a sweet spot that is the best for the individual, and again, it's going to be different for every individual, although it's going to be relatively close within that range. But don't go around saying if you do more than 8 sets, it's pointless. Don't be that fucking guy, because that's not the case. And there are times when it makes sense to increase volume, just depending on your progression and where you're at. But there is a point where it's, you know, a point of diminishing returns, and you don't want to go super ridiculously high, right? You don't want to be doing 50, 40 fucking working sets for a muscle group in a week. But once we figure out how much volume we want to start with or stay around, that's when frequency will come into play, right? So if we want to have a more specialized split where we're focusing on a muscle group like bringing up back, and we want to have that be the priority, we're going to have more volume attributed to that. So therefore, we're not going to do all of that volume in a single session, so we might need to break it up into 2 different sessions. So that's when having that frequency would come into play, and now where we're going to place those 2 back sessions and how we're going to break up that volume between those. So that's how frequency comes into play. It also depends on what you're able to really do within a session, and like I said, not everybody can do 10 working sets for a muscle group in a session. You might not be able to, so therefore if you want to hit 10 working sets for whatever reason, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to. You're going to need more frequency within that to break that up to hit your goal volume for the week. And that's just how frequency would play a factor here. My camera keeps shutting off after every 5 minutes. I think it's because I'm shooting 4K. So if you're watching this and you know why, I'm shooting on a Sony ZV-1, so let me know in the comments because it gets annoying having to restart this every 5 minutes. But back to what I was saying. When we are talking about volume, there are certain ranges we want to stay in, right? So what are those ranges? And again, these are averages, right? Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less. Don't be so stuck on these exact numbers. These are just averages. And it's going to depend on really how advanced you are, whether you're a beginner or not. And within the context of this video, I want to refer to beginner as somebody who already necessarily isn't a real like beginner, right? You know, because beginners typically don't know how to fucking do anything, and they'll respond to anything at all. They get away with literally doing anything. They're just gonna respond because they literally have not had any adaptations. It's just a new stimulus on the body. They're gonna respond and grow. So they can get away with doing a bunch of shit wrong. So let's talk about a beginner in the context of somebody who already knows how to train, has form and execution down, knows how to execute with intent, knows how to do things properly, knows how to actually go to failure, because it's a huge thing that most beginners can't do. But let's refer to this beginner, somebody who has all those things down, knows how to go to failure, but still is somewhat new to this and can progress at a relatively faster rate. Compared to somebody who's just been doing this for a much longer time, has been in this for years, is more advanced, and is progressing at a much slower rate. So that would be somebody who's advanced. And in the context of that being a beginner, I would say we would want to stick anywhere between around 5 to 10 working sets per muscle group a week. Again, average, could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more. That's up to you to figure out. Start lower, titrate up. If we're talking about somebody who's advanced, I would say anybody who's, if you're trying to grow, just like the majority of your body parts you're trying to grow, I would say on average anywhere between 6, 8 to 12 working sets per muscle group a week. And you can do that all in one session, or you could break that up if you need to. If you're advanced, you probably don't need to break that up. You could probably do that fine within one session. It shouldn't really be an issue. And again, we're talking in the context of all these sets going to absolute failure. If you're not going to failure, you're going to have to bump that volume up more to get the same result. So that would be just your base body parts, right? And we could bring that a little bit lower if there's something that you're specifically not trying to grow. Because remember, bodybuilding is an art. You're trying to build your physique the way that you want it to look and how you envision it, and what's going to present the best physique on stage, if that's what you're doing if you want to win, or you're sculpting your body. So you need to do that accordingly. And if there's something that is just overpowering, you're not trying to build it anymore, then you might want to have less volume, cater towards that specific muscle group. But if there's something you also are trying to really bring up, a weaker body part, you're going to have more volume cater towards that. So if you're trying to bring up a specific muscle group, a weaker body part, I would have that. Once we get past that 12 working sets and we're into the 15 to 20 working set range, that would be more catered towards bringing up a weaker body part, and we would have to break that up into 2 sessions, because we're not going to be able to do 20 effective working sets in a session for one muscle group when we're trying to bring that up. So we're going to have to break that up into 2 sessions, and again, that's where frequency will come into play when designing a specialized split for somebody trying to bring up a weak body part. And again, because I know people are going to keep asking this, how do I know exactly how much volume I need to do? And you need to stop being so stuck on a number, right? Start on the lower end. Like I said, if you're a beginner, start at maybe 4 or 5 sets, titrate up and see how you respond, see how you are progressing. You might need more volume. If you're not progressing, you could add in intensifiers, you could do things like that. But don't just start at the super high end range. I would start on the lower end range and titrate your way up to find that sweet spot for you. And if you're progressing, everything's going good, there's no reason to change it. If everything's going well and you are progressing, there is no reason to change anything. And this is also where something like auto-regulation comes into play. And this is how I train and approach my volume. I don't count volume at all. I don't keep track of this shit. Who cares? I just go by how I feel. I know if I'm doing effective sets or not, but that comes with experience. That comes with being more advanced. There comes a point where you know whether or not you're doing junk volume. If you actually pay attention to this shit and listen to your body, you know what junk volume is. You know when you're still doing effective sets within a workout and you're actually getting something out of them when they're stimulating reps. You could tell. And that's where auto-regulation comes into play. And I know that's hard to really grasp as a beginner, but as you get more advanced, you'll be able to auto-regulate. And some days, you might only need, even an advanced person, you might only need to do 4 or 5 sets in a workout session, working sets for a muscle group. And some other days you could do 10 to 12 working sets absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Go by how you feel. If you feel like you're not doing effective stimulating sets, then you should probably stop. You're either doing something wrong or you're just doing too much. But on the other end, if you're doing these little amounts of volume and you always feel like you could do more, then go for it. Do some more. Can't really hurt you. And if you feel like they're stimulating effective sets, you're probably going to get something out of them. Now, like I said before, frequency does not matter when total volume is equated to force. So a lot of people try to make this argument with push-pull legs, and they're like, you're hitting every muscle group twice a week, you're hitting that 800 times a year, whatever the fuck it is, and that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're still doing the same total amount of volume, and honestly, I personally prefer to do more of that volume in a single session than breaking it up, because it simply just feels like I'm not doing enough in a session. Like in push-pull legs, it feels like I'm doing nothing. And at the end of the day, what also comes into play here is preference, right? How you like to train. I hate doing 4 fucking working sets for chest in a workout. I'm doing push-pull legs. I feel, what the fuck is this? I feel like a bitch, right? It's not enjoyable for me. And you need to train in a way that you enjoy. That is the most important aspect over everything and anything. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. When we're in bodybuilding, we bodybuild because we enjoy it. Nobody bodybuilds. You hear all these optimal guys, these optimal science guys, the best way to do things, this, that, science, literature, all this stuff. And at the end of the day, no bodybuilder, as far as I know, gets into bodybuilding is just like, I need to do things the most perfect way that's gonna, make me have the most fucking gains no matter what. I don't care if I hate my workout. I'm gonna train, because really on paper, the best way to train is very fucking boring, and nobody wants to train that way. It just sucks. Nobody wants to train that way. Why people get into this is because they enjoy training. They love bodybuilding, and you need to enjoy your training. People like to train like animals. They like to do intense things. They like to add in intensifiers. They like to challenge themselves mentally and push the envelope. It's what makes it fun. It's why people have this as a hobby. It's why they love to do it. And I know that's not everybody, but you need to take that into consideration. How do you like to train? Because that is a huge factor that a lot of people like to overlook when they're talking about these things. But like I was saying, frequency doesn't matter when total volume is equated for. But I want to talk about the problem with push-pull legs that I constantly see. And I don't like push-pull legs. I hate it, but it could be a fine split, and we're not going to show examples for it today because, like I said, I hate it. But it could be fine if you have different rotations within it. That would mean having like a quad focused day, a hamstring focused day, a shoulder focused day, a more chest focused day. Having rotations within that so that you're giving each muscle adequate attention throughout the whole microcycle or split, and not pushing things off to the end, giving them less effort, because that is the problem with push-pull legs. Is for one, people usually have one rotation. They do the same 3 days over and over again. And what happens with that is, for one, when you're doing push-pull legs, you're doing chest, shoulders, and triceps in a session. You're doing legs in a whole session. You're doing, your back, your biceps, and muscle groups like your biceps, your shoulders, your calves, and your triceps pretty much always tend to get neglected in your basic push-pull leg split, the way that I see 99% of people, the way they run them. And even if they're doing adequate amount of volume throughout the week for it, they're focusing just on their chest, they're focusing just on their back, they're focusing just maybe more so on their quads. And the level of effort that you give when you're training a muscle during an exercise plays a huge factor as well. So when you're pushing triceps off to the end of your workout, or biceps off to the end always, or you're just not really emphasizing your hamstrings or your calves, they're going to end up being lagging muscle groups in the long run. And that's why we see that the majority of guys who start training on something like push-pull legs, they usually have really small arms down the road because they never put emphasis on their arms to begin with, and they have these overpowering backs and chest. And if that's the look you're going for, sure, so be it, but I would not advise doing it that way. I would advise setting up your split so that you are giving every muscle adequate attention, and you're not trying to cram 3 things into a session every time you train, or just trying to do all these different exercises within that to hit your chest, shoulders, triceps every single time. And I would also, like I said, have different rotations within that, so that you could have one day where you're starting off with shoulders, giving more emphasis to that, having one day where you start with chest, having one day where there's more tricep work on the push day than the other day, more upper back work on one of the pull days than the other day. So just have that in rotation. But I'm not gonna talk about legs push pull in the examples that I'm about to show here. I lied. First split that I have right now here is push pull legs arms. So it's push pull legs but plus arms. I have an actual program on this on my website, which is actually linked below. It's legs push pull arms. So similar to this, just a little bit different, but this is the first example that I wrote out here, and this is a 4-day split. As you can see, on our push day, we're doing about 8 to 12 sets for chest, 8 to 12 sets for delts. On your pull day, you're doing about 8 to 12 sets for back. So again, we're staying within that range. It's going to be relatively the same for all these muscle groups, but it could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more. Remember, it doesn't have to be exactly like this. These are just averages. And for legs, we're doing about 6 to 10 sets for quads, 6 to 10 for hams. And the reason why I have those a little bit lower is because I don't think you need as much volume with legs, especially when you're training to failure. Again, these are all within the context if you're going to absolute failure on all these sets. I think you could definitely get away with less sets when we're talking about training legs, and it's also a lot more fatiguing with that. And then arms would be 8 to 12 sets, both biceps and triceps, and then you can see the total weekly volume for that there. So it's all relatively the same, so this would be a good split for somebody who's just trying to build overall mass, build a foundation. It's only 4 days a week, and there's nothing wrong with training only 4 days a week. You're having more time to rest and recover. A lot of people think they need to train more, and that's not true. The more rest, not always the more rest the better, because we don't want to be resting fucking 5 days a week. But obviously, you don't want to be not resting a lot either. So I would say 2 to 3 rest days a week is pretty ideal. And again, this also plays into the person's lifestyle and how many days a week they really want to train and dedicate to this. And as you get more advanced too, having more rest is going to be more beneficial, because when you're a beginner, you can recover a lot faster. You're just going to be able to do more. And as you get more muscle tissue, you're dealing with these heavier loads, creating more muscle damage. It's going to take longer to recover when you're training to failure like this. So a lot of these bigger guys do only train 4 days, 5 days a week max. Oh yeah, if you're wondering about calves and abs, they're not in this video. I didn't put them in any of the splits. That's because calves are really just one of those things where you could throw them in anywhere. You could train them every day. They don't even apply to these volume rules, honestly. You could do a lot more volume for calves, and it all just comes down to genetics and whatnot. But calves and abs are something you could train a lot more frequently, so you could throw them into the end of any of these days or even the beginning. If you are really lacking calves and you need to prioritize those, I would always recommend doing them at the beginning of the workout, starting off with those. And I would start off with at least 2 times a week, and you could titrate up from there. I've said this before, but the most growth I've personally ever seen in my calves is by doing them 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off, consistently 4 months. and I would do about 6 to 7 working sets every time I would train them. And yes, they were sore, but I still did it anyways, and they blew up relatively fast. But I can't promise that'll happen for you. I'm just saying what my experience was. So now let's look at the second split that I have written out here, and this is a 5-day split. And this is another split that's going to be good for just somebody who's trying to build overall mass, build a foundation. And this is going to start with day 1, which is a quad focus leg day. So we're still hitting hams and quads in this day, but it's more quad prioritized. So you get 6 to 8 sets, around 6 to 8 sets for quads, around 2 to 4 sets for hamstrings. And day 2 is back day, just back to big muscle group. So we're doing 8 to 12 sets for back. Day 3, chest and biceps, 8 to 12 sets, both chest and biceps. Day 4 is going to be a rest day, so 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. Day 5 will be a hamstring focused leg day. So again, we're still in a little bit of quads there, more hamstring focused though. So 6 to 8 sets for hams, 2 to 4 sets for quads. And day 6 is going to be shoulders and triceps, so 8 to 12 sets for both of those. And as you can see, the total weekly volume adds up to everything being pretty much the same. And now this split is something I would advise more so over than the legs push-pull arms or push-pull legs arms if you had to choose one, just because this gives a little bit more emphasis to the legs. As I said, you could get away with less volume for legs, but when you're doing it like this, you're breaking up, you're having more priority on one day towards quads, so you can put more effort into that and more effort into your hamstrings on the other day, which is going to obviously just result in better results over the long run here. And we're not talking about a huge difference in volume here, but this is going to be a little better if you want to just really bring up your legs more. And this isn't a leg specialized split, because we could definitely create one of those, but this is just catered towards a bit more leg work, making sure you're getting adequate stimulus to your quads and your hamstrings throughout the week, no matter what. Let's move on to a specialized focus split, and I have 3 different variations of these wrote up for you. I don't even know what is English, but this one, the first one I got here, is a arm focus specialized split. So we're gonna start off here with day 1, which is full leg day, hams and quads, 6 to 10 sets each. Day 2 will be chest and biceps, 8 to 12 sets for chest, 6 to 8 for biceps. Again, remember, could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less. Shoulders and triceps, 8 to 12 for shoulders, 6 to 8 for triceps. So why are those lower now? It's because we have a full arm day coming, so we don't want to do so much volume within these sessions that we're not able to recover to hit arms again. That's why we have more frequency. We break up that total volume as opposed to just doing 20 working sets in a single session. But we're able to hit that in the week somehow. So we got to break it up somehow. And day 4 is gonna be rest. Day 5 is gonna be back, 8 to 12 sets. And day 6 would be the full arm day, so 8 to 12 sets each, biceps and triceps. And then if you look at the total volume, you see how biceps and triceps have a lot more volume targeted towards them than the other muscle groups. So you got 6 to 10 for legs, you got 8 to 12 for chest, back, shoulders, again, a little bit less, a little bit more, and biceps, triceps, 14, 20, so anywhere within that range. So on the low end of specializing a muscle, I would say about 14 sets, but you could go up to 20 sets. Once we're going past 20 sets, again, could be a little bit higher, just depends, but I would not go much higher than that. I don't think at that point, if you're able to do 25, 30 working sets in a week, you're probably not training hard enough if we're talking about working sets to failure. So now the next split that we got is a back emphasis split. And this is a split that I actually ran many times. And I ran it just like this. So day 1, we got chest and biceps, 8 to 12 each, hams and back, 2 to 4 sets for hams, 8 to 10 for back, shoulders and triceps, 8 to 12 for triceps, 8 to 12 for shoulders. Day 4 rest, 8 to 10 for back again on day 5. It's our second back day. And day 6 would be quad focus leg day, 6 to 10 for quads, 4 to 6 for hams. Because remember, we're also training hams with back on that day too, so we're getting hamstring work twice a week. And the reason why we're training hams with back is because they just go well together. Posterior chain work, consider it like a pull day. You could do RDLs on this first day, day 2. You could do like a leg curl if you want, and then just do more back work within that, and then have your back day on day 5. And you could also switch days 5 and 6, which is something I would do sometimes, just depending on my recovery. That'd be totally fine if you want to do that as well. But if you look at the total volume here, it's 8 to 12 sets for chest in a week, 14 to 20 sets in back. Everything else is 8 to 12 or 6 to 10 for the legs. And as you see, obviously back is disproportionately higher than the rest of them because that is the priority within this split. So remember, when we're trying to specialize something, we want to have more volume catered towards that. If we're growing everything else at the same rate, then you're not bringing up that body part. That defeats the purpose of sculpting your physique. You can't just grow everything at the same rate, because if you were just, I just want to bring up my back and I just have more frequency to it, but you're still doing the same amount of volume for everything else, it's not going to really fucking matter. And if your chest is overpowering, your shoulders are overpowering, but you have a weak back, you're still doing the same amount of volume for them, that's never going to become a strong point. Yes, it'll grow, but you want to bring that muscle up to match the other muscles to create a complete physique when we're talking about bodybuilding. So you need to do less for those muscle groups, and that might even call for, if you're really trying to specialize this, is having all of those other muscle groups on the low end of that rep, of that range for working sets, just because you might not want to even really hypertrophy those muscles that much. You might just want to maintain them and solely focus on bringing up your back, and that's how you really will bring up a weak point, is just not growing anything else and solely focus on growing that. That way you can really just catch up and maybe even start to overpower that and become a stronger point. So that's one way you could go about it. But I got one more split here that I drew up for you guys, so let's look at that one. And that one is going to be a chest emphasis specialized split. So let's look at the example I have here. So as you can see, day 1 is back, 8 to 12 sets. Again, chest and shoulders, 8 to 12 sets, shoulders 4 to 6 sets, legs 6 to 10 for both quads and hams. Day 4 rest. As you can tell, I really like this 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off thing. I think it just is a great way to run a split. I love it, and I think I originally got that from John Meadows, honestly, but I've been running my splits like this for years. And as you can see, the examples that I'm giving you are obviously like my bias examples, the way that I like to design programming, but I'm giving you examples, and hopefully these are giving you ideas as how you could set up your own split and how you would go about that and what they could potentially look like. It doesn't need to be exactly like this. You could steal these if you want and run with these, but you're gonna have to figure out what exercises you want to go into this workout. But these are just my examples. Doesn't have to be exactly like this. Doesn't have to be these exact set ranges. Again, these are just averages, examples, trying to help you guys create an idea, get the idea of how to create the split, how you would go about it, what that would look like, and what it would entail. So again, chest emphasis split, we got day 1 back, 8 to 12 sets. Chest and shoulders on day 2, 8 to 12 sets. Shoulders is 4 to 6 sets, legs 6 to 10 sets each, quads and hams. Day 4 rest. Chest and shoulders again on day 5, chest 6 to 8 sets. Shoulders 4 to 6 sets, so a little less volume for chest on that day, and then arms 8 to 12 sets each on day 6, 7. Day 7 is full rest day. So as you see, total volume, again, looking at the same thing, 6 to 10 sets each for quads, a little less, a little more, 8 to 12 for everything else, and then 14 to 20 for chest, as that is going to be the primary focus within this micro cycle. So hopefully you get the idea here. If you're watching this and you're just deciding, fuck this is too complicated, I got some good news for you. I have a program you could buy, 2 of them, the Bro Split and Legs Push Pull Arms. So I actually have, the Bro Split isn't in here, it's a bit different, but the Legs Push Pull Arms program was, shown it's a little bit different than that exact split. But you could go purchase those, and this will take all that guesswork out of it for you, and you can see how those are written and what goes into those, and both of them have gotten nothing but great feedback since I released them. People love them, so you could check it out if you want, or you could take these, run with them, try to figure out what exercise you want to put into them, make your own split, do something completely else from this and completely just disregard everything I said, because maybe you just think I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Whatever you want to do, I'm okay with it. But hopefully that helped, guys. I try to make this short and concise and get to the point, because we could really get into the nitty-gritty of all these things of intensity, volume, all that stuff, and really just go down a rabbit hole, make this an hour-long video, and that was not the point of this video. I wanted to just get directly to the point, show you some examples, and just make this short and concise, like I said. If you want to learn more about these topics in depth, that's the purpose of the podcast that I have, Brass Tack Bodybuilding. If you haven't checked that out already, I suggest that you do so. There's a lot of great information in those, a lot of valuable stuff that you could take, a lot of educational material. I'm interviewing a lot of good people I have coming on soon, so I'm very excited for that, and I'm sure I'll have a lot more coming on in the future as well. So again, if you haven't checked out the podcast and you really want to learn, go ahead and check that out. But yeah, I hope this helped. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you like it, make sure you're subscribed to this channel, and again, as always, if you order anything from Raw, or is it Raw or Revive, use code SEB. I appreciate it a lot. Please. I'm serious. Use code SEB.